Last night, you probably stood in front of your fridge, picked up something, saw a date printed on it, decided it was too old, and threw it straight in the trash. Here is the strange part. That food was almost certainly fine. That little date has quietly controlled your kitchen your whole life. You trust it completely. You never question it. When the number passes, the food goes in the bin, no argument. But what if that number was never telling you what you thought? Here is the truth almost nobody knows. The date on your food is not an expiration date. It does not tell you when the food goes bad. It does not tell you when it becomes dangerous. It means something completely different. In the United States, there is no federal law that forces most foods to carry a date at all. The government does not check these dates. Nobody approves them. There is only one single food that is legally required to have one. That one food is baby formula. That is it. The formula you feed an infant has a real date because its nutrients fade over time. Everything else in your entire kitchen carries a date that no law requires and no agency controls. So if the government is not setting these dates, then who is? The answer is simple. The companies that make the food set the dates themselves. They pick the number, they print it on the package, and nobody checks their work. Now here is where it gets interesting. When a company picks that date, they are not asking when the food becomes unsafe. They are guessing when the food stops tasting its absolute best. Peak flavor, peak freshness, nothing to do with safety. Think about what that means for a second. A yogurt does not suddenly turn poisonous the morning after its date. The company simply decided that after that day, the yogurt might taste slightly less fresh than they want you to remember it. And here is the sneaky part. Companies actually have a reason to set that date early. If you throw food out fast, you come back to buy more, sooner. A short date quietly pushes you to spend again. It is good for business. Now walk down any grocery aisle and look closely. You will see best by, sell by, use by, enjoy by, and expires on. They sound like 5 different warnings, but almost all of them mean the exact same thing: quality, not safety. But one of them is even stranger than the rest. The sell by date is not meant for you at all. It is a message to the store. It tells the shop how long to display the item. You were never the audience. So when you see sell by the 5th, and it is now the 7th, you panic and toss it. But that date was telling a stock clerk to move it off the shelf. The food itself often has days or weeks of life left. You might think surely someone made rules to fix this confusion. And states did try, but every state wrote its own rules, and they all contradict each other. What one state demands, another state bans. It is a giant, tangled mess. In some states, a store cannot legally sell milk after its date. Cross a border into the next state, and that exact same milk is perfectly legal to sell. The milk did not change. Only the invisible line under it did. Now let us talk about what all this confusion actually costs us. Because it turns out this tiny misunderstanding, printed in small letters, adds up to one of the biggest and quietest forms of waste in the entire country. Researchers found something almost hard to believe. Around 90% of Americans throw away perfectly good food simply because they misread these dates. 9 out of 10 of us, tossing food that was completely safe over a number we misunderstood. And when you zoom out, the picture gets even more staggering. Roughly 40% of all the food in America is never eaten. It is grown, shipped, sold, and then quietly dumped. Much of it because of these misunderstood little dates. Think about your own trash can this week. The bread you tossed, the eggs you were scared of, the leftovers you gave up on. Multiply that by millions of homes every single day, and you start to feel the true weight of it. It is not just food that vanishes, it is money. The average family throws hundreds of dollars of good food into the bin every year. You worked for that money. You spent it on groceries, then you threw those groceries away. Now this is where our story finds its hero. Because one man looked at this exact problem and refused to accept it. He had spent his career inside the food world, and he knew a secret most shoppers never get to learn. His name is Doug Rausch, and he was the president of Trader Joe's, one of the most beloved grocery chains in America. He ran the aisles, he knew the shelves, and he watched perfectly good food get thrown out every single day. Doug saw the trucks haul away food that was completely fine, fruit slightly past its date, groceries in dented boxes, meals that hit their number that morning, all of it dumped, not because it was bad, but because of a printed date. And at the very same time, he knew millions of families in America could barely afford to eat. Good food was being buried in landfills while hungry people stood just a few miles away. That contrast is what he could not shake. So Doug did something bold. He decided to open a store that would sell this so-called expired food on purpose. Food past its date at deeply discounted prices for the families who needed it most. He called it the daily table. But Doug faced a huge problem, and it was not getting the food. Grocers were happy to hand it over. The real challenge was convincing regular people that food past its date was actually safe. Their fear of that number ran deep. That fear is the whole reason this waste keeps happening. We do not trust our own eyes, our own nose, our own good sense. We trust a number a stranger printed years ago. So how do you actually tell if food is safe? The answer is almost funny in how simple it is. For thousands of years, humans had no dates on anything. They used the tools built into their own bodies, their eyes to look, their nose to smell, and it worked just fine. Your nose is actually an incredible safety device. When food genuinely goes bad, it usually tells you loudly. It smells sour, rotten, or just plain wrong. That sharp warning is your body doing the exact job the printed date pretends to do. Take eggs, the food people fear the most. There is a trick older than any date label. Drop an egg in a glass of water. If it sinks and lies flat, it is fresh. If it floats to the top, then let it go. Now think about the foods in your pantry. Dry pasta, rice, canned beans, honey. These can sit safely for years, sometimes decades. That date on the can is almost meaningless. Stored cool and dry, these foods will outlast the number by ages. Honey is the wildest example of all. Real honey basically never goes bad. Archaeologists have found honey in ancient tombs thousands of years old, and it was still perfectly edible, yet your jar at home still has a little date on it. Now I want to be honest and fair with you. There is one label that deserves a bit more respect. Use by on certain fresh items like meat or ready meals can point to real safety. Those are the ones worth watching closely. But even then, use by is not a magic switch that flips at midnight. It is a careful estimate set on the cautious side. The point is not to ignore every date. The point is to stop treating them all like hard deadlines. Here is something that matters far more than any date: how you store your food. A carton of milk left on the counter spoils fast. That same milk kept cold in the back of the fridge can easily outlive its printed number. The date on the package assumes nothing about your kitchen. It cannot know if your fridge runs cold or warm, if you sealed the lid, if you left it out for hours. Your habits decide the real life of the food, not the label. Now let us return to Doug and his daily table, because his bold idea actually worked. People came, families who once struggled to buy fresh food could suddenly afford it. And that so-called expired food fed real people safely, day after day. His store proved something powerful to the whole country. That mountain of food we throw away is not garbage, it is dinner. It is groceries, it is help for a struggling family, all of it, hiding behind a number nobody understood. And Doug was not alone. Researchers at Harvard and major food groups dug into this and reached the same conclusion. The date system is broken, it confuses shoppers, it wastes billions, and it does almost nothing to keep anyone actually safe. There is a slow push now to fix it. The idea is simple: shrink all those confusing phrases down to just two. One that clearly means quality and one that clearly means safety. Two labels so nobody ever has to guess again. But change like this moves painfully slow. Big food companies, state governments, and years of habit all sit in the way. So until that day arrives, the only real defense you have is the knowledge sitting inside your own head right now. And that knowledge changes everything about how you shop and cook. You are no longer a slave to a printed number. You become the judge. You look, you smell, you think. You decide what is good using senses you have had all along. So next time you are standing at your fridge, do not let that little date bully you. Pick the food up, give it a real look, give it a proper smell. In most cases, you will find it is completely fine to eat. Of course, use your head. If something is covered in mold, smells foul, or the can is bulging, trust that and throw it out. Real spoilage gives you real signals. The goal is not to be reckless, it is to be smart. When you really sit with all of this, something bigger comes into view. For years, a tiny printed number quietly trained millions of us to fear our own food, to distrust our senses, to throw away money and meals out of pure confusion. And nobody did this on purpose to hurt you. There was no grand villain. It grew from good intentions, business habits, and a tangle of rules that nobody ever cleaned up. That is often how the strangest systems in our lives quietly form. But now you see it clearly, and that changes the ripple you send out. The food you save is food that never rots in a landfill. The money you keep stays in your pocket. One small habit, quietly making a real difference. And here is the best part. This is knowledge you can pass on. Tell your family, tell your friends. The next time someone reaches to toss good food over a date, you can be the one who stops them and explains the truth. Doug Roush started with one small store and one simple belief that good food should feed people, not fill landfills. And every time you rescue a meal in your own kitchen, you are quietly carrying on that exact same idea yourself. So from now on, look at that little date differently. It is not a command, it is not a deadline, it is just a quiet suggestion from a stranger who guessed months ago when their food might taste its very best. You hold the real power here. Your eyes, your nose, your judgment. Tools far older and far wiser than any number stamped on a box. Trust them, they have kept humans fed and safe for longer than any label has existed. So the next time you open your fridge and spot that little printed date, just smile. Because now you know the secret it was hiding all along. It was never telling you the food was bad, it was only ever a guess.